to the already not yet.
Know thy greatest adversary. One must understand that our adversaries do not play by laws and rules. Especially our laws and rules. However, they are determined to use our rules and laws against us even as they seek to replace and impose their own versions and interpretations of them. Our adversaries seek to use us against us and others against us while creating conditions in us that mitigate our ability to push back punitively against them. Hostile goals and objectives. 1. To foster conditions to erode all areas of society from within, seeding it with the seeds of deception and destruction. 2. To cause death by 1,000 cuts. 3. To create conditions to keep us locked into our own rules and predictability while degrading us across all 7 spheres of societal influence. 4. Using the adversary's strengths against them while creating more vulnerabilities, while hitting the weaknesses and newly created ones. Unrestricted warfare, chaos warfare and corporatocratic durable disorder. 5. To wear down and wear out, breaking the will to fight against their designs. 6. Mythos projective, to create the global appearance of America and our allies being the irrational aggressor while painting themselves in false light as being the rational actor to deceive people, tribes, interests and nations. 7. Whitewash, create the appearances that they are strong and painted black we are weak and corrupted alongside our ideals, systems of economics and governance. They wish to convince both their citizens and ours of this. This is reality inversion, projection and perception shaping. The triggered state response modality. 1. Distort. 2. Deceive. 3. Distrust. 4. Divert. 5. Divide. 6. Degrade. 7. Dependence. 8. Devour. 9. Destroy. This is how they do it. 1. Identify strengths and use them against them by targeting them with means and methods to weaken them covertly by redirecting their strengths into traps which create and or expose their weak points. 2. Foster greed and pride and then use it against them, having lured them into a trap that makes them and their wealth, reputations and influence dependent upon you. 3. Lure into foreign traps while exposing their domestic vulnerabilities to exploitation. 4. Sow confusion in the leadership and citizenry of your targeted nation. Then create an environment conducive for political correctness. 5. Find useful idiots to use as agitators to create an environment of fear, suspicion and chaos. They will be indoctrinated with lies and mixtures of facts and fictions to whip up hatred against their unsuspecting fellow citizens. 6. Gain influence and control of thought leaders and influencers across many key organizations and in important critical educational institutions. 7. Implement a pharmaco strategy to poison citizenry with drugs to create social and health crisis using corporate interests and illicit criminal channels. The resulting cascading effects will allow you to make money on the destruction of your foes while costing them increasing amounts of money in attempting to mitigate the cascading ripple effects. 8. Poison the information and co-opt the 7 spheres of influence while gradually taking over industries and organizations with which one can solidify influence operations. Undermining the cohesion of each of the 7 spheres allows for a steady corrupting of the society at every level over time, allowing you to gain power, wealth and control over increasingly larger swaths of the private and public sector. 9. Work through proxies to fuel the fires between the divergent groups in that country with truth mixed with fiction to bring it to a boil. Spark social unrest so as to trigger blowback from the other side or sides. The more oppositional sides the better, because it is easier to use them all against one another by simple social engineering and disinformation tactics. 10. Play the wise sage or good potential ally, to gain influence over the group or groups with which you think you can manipulate the entire nation state with and can gain the most political capital from. 11. Set them up to appear complicit with unethical, illegal or plant actual compromising evidence so they cannot get out of your trap. Offer to keep it secret if they meet some predetermined set of requirements which you can use both against them directly as well as their opposition could use against them. If they decide to turn against you. Or 12. Do the same with their opposition so you can play the two or more off of one another. by taking a multi-target approach where you feed all oppositional sides real and manufactured secret information on their perceived enemies, which fosters that believe your lie and make them easier to manipulate. 13. Covertly foster extremism in all the opposing groups who you then manipulate into becoming an ideological and, if need be, a militarized ones. 14. Fuel each opposing group with disinformation and false evidence which feeds their confirmation bias, reinforcing their fear and hatred of the others. 15. Manufacture events which will bring the two or more oppositional groups into a conflict zone. An example would be a protest. Embed agitators in both sides to trigger violence. 16. Use the manufactured event to create more propaganda to feed to all oppositional groups. 17. Play the false peacemaker while you extract as much information and political and economic capital as you can, using their binary opposition to one another as a cover and blame-shifting mechanism. 18. Isolate the nation from their allies and their leaders from influences which are not in line with your goals. 19. Repeat the above with increasing intensity within targets and expand to neighboring countries, using the same strategy and tactics to play them all off one another while you gain more power over all of them yet appear to be the rational peacemaker. 20. Break their next level alliances through machinations and obscuration. 21. Create a perceived threat or a final trust-breaking series of public events between those nations who were once allied with them to sow deeper divisions. 22. Feed all of them real and false information on one another until they don't know how to trust one another. 23. All the while continuing to feed each of those nation-states disinformation which exponentially increases the confusion, divisions and chaos among their people against their leaders and their leaders against their people, and divide them into every possible way against one another. 24. Bring it all to the cusp of total collapse and then step in as a benevolent helping hand to heal the wounds you created to gain the trust of them all. 25. Then make them all a proxy alliance against those who refuse to join the false construct and false peace to be used as a power block economically, politically and militarily to regain full superpower status. 26. Promote a multipolar power world to address the manufactured appearances created by the weaponized narrative which have slandered, accused and corrupted the manufactured threat. 27. Then attempt to play those other power blocks against one another, having laid the groundwork via systematic infiltration, propaganda and shows to render oppositional nations ineffective at the least to stand against the global takeover goals, and at the worst bring them to their destruction by first rotting their culture from within, weakening every structure of power in those nations, them triggering social unrest, economic instability, distrust in their government and leaders, them triggered civil wars. 28. Seed all targeted nations with ideological proxies who can act as mouthpieces the escalation of the propaganda war. Gain influence in all 7 spheres of influence and establish weaponizable social engineering mechanisms up within networks. 29. Then lure those nations into protracted conflicts with nations you have covertly supplied weapons, technology and expertise to, which bog them down in within their own region or in multiple wars around the world, spreading out their armed forces to the point of vulnerability. 30. Then play cat and mouse military games to put more pressures on those openly and covertly targeted nations. This can provide a means of studying deployment patterns, force costly deployments, draining financial means over time, degrading and wearing down personnel and equipment. It also can provide a diversion, focusing attention away from one's domestic operations onto foreign adventures while allowing hostile forces to operate more easily in their adversaries' homelands. See the 7 spheres of influence operations. See how magicians divert the attention of an audience. 31. Covertly arm and support proxies embedded within their homeland, or in nearby nations from which they can cross the borders and infiltrate the targeted nations. 32. Degrade and destroy the will to fight within nations by use of weaponized pharmaco and a flood of disinformation and weaponized narrative strategies to poison, wear down, break physically and mentally by applying increasing societal stresses impacting health and well-being of public. These types of operations cause confusion, division and conflict within the populations of the nations, amplifying stresses and increasing tensions between various demographics, starting and fueling escalating cyclical conflict feedback loops between those various demographics. 33. Then hit them with asymmetrical cyber and terrorist-like attacks, putting both the government and the population into utter chaos, while you use more proxies like Iran and North Korea to provoke military conflict on an already stretched out military so they are tied down. Then hit the homeland with a WMD like an EMP blast or a couple of nukes using proxies. Or threaten it and capture the entire power grid and financial systems via cyber war tactics. Then you deliver your terms for that nation's surrender or total destruction. Sound familiar? It should. You are living in the middle of it. These are just the base levels of meta warfare. As it is for people, so too it is for the nation. Max DAVES.